So have you ever been called to be a witness in a trial? I haven't. I've always wanted to be a witness. I want to be one of those witnesses like on Law and Order. You know, the one that, like at the crucial, critical moment, gets called to the stand. I want to be the one who points and says, that's him. That's him. I saw him do it. But I haven't had that joy yet. And yet I know that the job of a witness is to simply explain what you know to be true, what you've seen, what you've experienced. But I've watched enough Judge Judy to know that even the best witnesses are going to get challenged. Even the best witnesses are going to be kind of challenged to be whether or not they're credible witnesses or not. So my question to you is, what kind of witness are you? What kind of witness are you? Jesus said that you shall be witnesses of these things. Now the things he is talking about, of course, is his resurrection. And you might say, whoa, I wasn't there. Jesus isn't talking about me, he's talking about the disciples. Well, maybe. But actually, I think that Jesus is referring to anybody who would say that they believe in Jesus' resurrection from the grave, that by virtue of faith, by belief, you're a witness. Now, all season long, we have been following this worship theme of going beyond I believe. Simply stated, we recognize how easy it is sometimes to simply fall back on a statement of belief, but fail to live our lives on a consistent basis, believing and living together, consistent with one another. Because for a lot of people, there's a disconnect between what they say they believe and then how they live their life. It's sort of like talking with somebody and having that person tell you, you know, how eating Big Macs every day of your life will someday cause your stomach to explode, but they tell you that on the way to McDonald's. So when it comes to the resurrection of Jesus, we are being told that we are witnesses. And we might say, you know, I'd like to believe that. I'd like to be a witness, but I just need a little bit of proof. And that's understandable because we are by nature skeptics. We live in an enlightened world, don't we? We have to have some stuff laid out for us that has some verifiable truth to them for us to believe in those things. You've probably taken chemistry classes in high school. You know that things have to be tested by an hypothesis. And you know that in a debate, you need to have a firm foundation of proof in order to make your argument, unless, of course, you're a politician. We base so much of what we do on proving things, making sure that they're reliable, making sure that they're true. I love baseball. In baseball, it's all about statistics and records. Let's say you make this argument that Babe Ruth is the greatest ball player ever to exist. And someone says to you, well, prove it. No problem. You can get the statistics book on baseball, and you can read the number of home runs he hit in critical games where he won the game because of a home run. You can read about all of the RBIs that he averaged season after season after season. You can read about his MVPs. You can read about the World Series teams he played on. You can go on and on and on. You can make a pretty solid case that Babe Ruth is the greatest player ever to play the game, and yet you've never seen him play. Well, maybe some of you older folk did. You would have to be an eyewitness. But by pointing to statistics and records, you can make a pretty solid case. But how do we do that with Jesus? How do we ever prove that Jesus existed, let alone rose from the grave? Now, if he had a batting average, that would be one thing. But to my knowledge, he didn't play the game. So when we go in search of proof, we got to recognize that when it comes to our matter of faith, verifiable proof is hard to come by. Absolute proof might be impossible to come by. Because there's always somebody who's going to disagree. There's always going to be someone who's going to say, well, Babe Ruth was great, but Willie Mays was greater. And so they pull out the statistics and the record books. And so that they will show different formulas. So then they will show different scientific studies. So they will show different conclusions. Anyone who's ever been a kid on a playground knows that the fighting words begin, oh yeah, prove it. So when it comes to the resurrection, simply say, okay, kind of hard to prove. Thomas Jefferson, great author of the Declaration of Independence, third president of the United States, once said, I have examined all the known superstitions of the world and do not find in our particular superstition, that is Christianity, one redeeming feature. They are all alike, he said, founded upon fables and mythologies. Hard to prove the resurrection story. So some might write it off as a fable or myth, but you don't have to. You don't have to. I mean, there is a lot of this story that rests, well, maybe not so much on proof, but on probability. On the probability that Jesus truly was a man, that he walked among us, that he had a ministry, that he had a following, that he was crucified, that he died, and that he was risen again. You see, the Christian story isn't something that was just made up in some dark room someplace back in the Middle East in the first century. No, the Christian story evolved over time by witnesses, time and again, coming together and saying, let me share with you what I saw, what I experienced, what I know. A couple of years ago, a lawyer turned journalist by the name of Lee Strobel began to look at the claims of Christianity and the reliability of this amazing story. He applied the inquisitiveness of a journalist along with the attention to the detail of a jurist, and he concluded that the Christian story not only has merit, but it's quite convincing. He went from being an atheist to becoming a Christian. And Strobel wrote a few books about his investigation into these claims. The most well-known is probably The Case for Christ. Maybe you've heard of it. And this morning, when you leave, we have a little book for you from Lee Strobel. It's entitled The Case for Easter. It's a few chapters out of A Case for Christ. And I hope that you will read this little book with a critical eye. I hope that you will follow his arguments throughout, because the bottom line is this. The Christian story isn't a fable or a myth. It has the basis of truth and reliability. There is persuasive and powerful evidence that Jesus not only claimed to be the Son of God, but he backed up the claim by rising from the dead. So read the book. But even better, I invite you to watch the television series on public television entitled Father Brown. Have you ever watched that show? Father Brown is a Roman Catholic priest in a small English village in the 1950s. I would not want to live in this small village because people drop dead left and right. And the police are called in to solve the cases, but they invariably get it wrong. You see, sometimes proof and evidence and a rush to judgment leads people to the wrong conclusions. And the police try to make sense of the things that they discover on evidence alone, and mostly they're wrong. But Father Brown, on the other hand, he's not interested in forensic evidence. He is interested in people, in the drama of their lives, in the way that their stories unfold, the things that they expose, the things they keep to themselves, the goodness in their soul and the sin in their soul. And he discovers the difficulties of what life living together is all about. And Father Brown invariably comes up not only with identifying who the murderer is, but the backstory behind the murder. We call these kind of shows mysteries, right? The word mystery is a strange one, because we usually use it to describe something that we can't explain. If there's a problem that we don't readily have an answer for, we shrug our shoulders and we say, well, it's a mystery. Is there life in outer space? It's a mystery. What happens to socks that go into the laundry? It's a mystery. Why can't the Cubs win the World Series? It's a mystery. But there is another way we talk about mystery. And it's, I think, the way that we need to talk about Jesus' resurrection from the grave. The other way this word mystery is used is to suggest that a quandary in life captivates us, draws us in, captures our minds, speaks to our souls, and fulfills the promises that we all hope for. Now, the first kind of mystery is something that we try to solve, but the second kind of mystery is the one that we enter into. And the further we go into it, the more we are revealed about the power of life as we know it. The next time your spouse or significant other tells you they love you, I dare you tell them, prove it. You can't prove love, right? You can hardly define love, but you know when you're in love, and you know what it's like to be loved. You can set up all sorts of scientific experiments about love, but it's not going to tell you much about love itself. Because love cannot be quantified. Love cannot be captured. Love cannot be measured. Love is a mystery. And the more you move into love, the more mysterious it is. The more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about the one who loves you, the more you learn about life itself. Love is a mystery. The deeper you go, the greater it is. Similarly, I would submit to you this morning that it might be great to study or read or discover possibilities of the probability of the resurrection. But the deeper power of the resurrection is to enter into its mystery. The basis of that mystery is that there is a God. I know for some, that's a philosophical debate waiting to happen. But further, that Jesus of Nazareth claimed to be the Son of God. Now there is some evidence that Jesus did indeed live, and that he indeed had a claim of messiahship, and that he died on a cross. Once again, there is evidence to suggest that that was a historical event, and that 3 days later he rose from the grave. And again, if you read Strobel's little book, you will discover that there is great evidence that would show that he indeed rose from the grave. But here's the piece for which there is no hard evidence, no verifiable proof. Jesus died on a cross to demonstrate to you the depth of God's love for you. You are loved by the Creator of the universe. Do you deserve that love? No way. In fact, you have done everything to prove that you do not deserve God's love. You mess up, you fail, you say things you shouldn't, you do things you wish you could take back, and instead, God decides to love you. And God goes in search of you. And when you were in your greatest sin, I don't know what that is, but when you were in it, according to St. Paul in his letter to the Romans, it was at that moment that Jesus died for you, all because of love. This is a great mystery. You cannot solve it. You cannot understand it. You can only accept it and believe it. And by believing, it is something that can captivate you and shape you and alter your whole life. And the deeper you move into the love of God, the greater it will define you. It will give you hope and joy and peace and purpose. It will become everything to you. And then, you are ready to be a witness. You can point your finger at Jesus and say, "It was him. I saw him do it." Amen.